So the question is, now that the coffee prices have gone up, are we paying fair trade prices? The short answer is no, because we're paying more than what the fair trade price is. The long answer would be, what is, I guess, a fair price in terms of what we value a fair price versus what fair trade stands for. So fair trade is a premium that is above the market value of coffee, and that's been amazing at establishing long-term commitments from large roasting houses or importers. So no, we're not paying the same as fair trade. We're actually paying more than what the fair trade market value is. So how do we make sure that the producers are being paid and the money is not going to bigger companies? Was that the question? Sorry? Yeah. Good question. The easiest way, I guess, for us to answer that is the fact that we have these long-term relationships with some of the producers that we've been buying coffee from. Some of them are a decade old, and we've been able to see the actual impact into where that money has been going, whether that has been infrastructure at the farm or investing in drying facilities or all the projects that we've had a chance to help develop. So we've been able to see firsthand, and that's something that we're trying to show everyone else, is to sort of where our money has been going. So the question is, what is a fair price to pay for coffee? That is a very, very difficult question to answer. That ties into lots of different scenarios and socio-economical factors depending on the country of origin, where the coffee is coming from, the cost of production. We can't pay Australian minimum wages in other countries because their economy doesn't necessarily support it. So for us, having that conversation with the producer or potentially the co-op as to what the cost of production is. For them, that's inclusive of fertilizers, staff, labor, etc., and understanding what it is they need from us to help achieve that, and then obviously to pay them for the product or the premium of the product on top of that. It's really warm. I might take this off. Is that okay?
Yes.
Can I explain the system in which Project Origin uses to buy coffee from coffee producers? So we source on a direct trade model. So either liaising directly with the producer themselves or potentially the person that is exporting their coffee. Understanding, again, the cost of production, for what purpose that coffee is being used for. Is it a regional coffee? Is it a what we would call a black label coffee, which is our blending coffees, or a green label coffee? So understanding or having that dialogue with the producer to understand what they need or how much the coffee is of value to them, and then for us to agree upon that value and that pricing structure and to pay them directly. Do I think direct trade will ever become the norm? I would like to say yes. I, however, believe that not everyone has the potential capabilities to be or to use a direct trade model. That is where either larger importers or potential exporting partners become useful. So my hope would be that it would be possible, but I don't know if we are currently in the economical world that we live in at a stage where that is feasible. So what is the cost of production? That is a question that is not easy to answer, mainly because of the cost of producing coffee in certain countries costs different to everywhere else. But historically, or pre-COVID times is probably the best way to explain it. We were told on an average cost of production was anywhere from 130 US cents per pound to about 160 US cents per pound. This is a generalizing number, but that has obviously changed over the past few years. Our suppliers or our producing partners have informed us wages, cost of fertilizers, etc. have increased from anywhere from 30 to 60%. And so that's obviously increased the cost of production, and that's not including the cost of the coffee market. So it's unfortunately not an easy answer. In some countries, it will be lower because of the infrastructure they have, and in some countries it will be higher. So has the sea market price changed in the past 20 years? On average, if you stretch it out over 20 years, the average pricing would have been about 130 cents per pound, which is sort of just the bare minimum at the cost of production. But if you look at it, it has changed quite dramatically up and down. And in some cases, coffee is actually cheaper today than what it was 10, 20 years ago. My opinion on cost transparency is it can be a valuable tool in understanding the cost of a coffee from a certain place. But again, it's not always a relative number, because a cost of a coffee, let's say it was 300 or 400 cents per pound in one country, is different to how much a coffee that is 300 or 400 cents per pound would be in another country. So I believe having all of this data available is a good thing, but understanding how relative that data is to a certain origin is equally as important. So if one reason that the cost of coffee or the sea market has increased because of supply shortages or crop shortages in Brazil, does that mean that that will then change as the crop yields increase over time? Potentially, yes. Unfortunately, we don't have a globe, or we don't understand how the price of coffee will change. That's something that we are not, trading speculative contracts on. But in theory, if there is supply and demand, if there's too much coffee, the cost goes down. If there's not enough coffee, the cost of coffee will go up. As a roaster or a cafe, trying to explain to your customers why the cost of coffee has been going up, and obviously how you can continue to operate as a business, is something that's not an easy conversation to have, and it's something that we as coffee importers have been having for a few years now with people that we help supply coffee to, is having that open dialogue and understanding. And we are now in a position in the world where everything is more expensive, so people or your general consumer is now a little more understanding that everything else is more expensive, not just the cost of the coffee, but the electricity, the wages, the cups that you're using, etc. Everything else has increased. But I feel having an open and honest conversation with your customer is the easiest way in which you can help explain as to why.
We might not even use it. Maybe we'll use it.
Hola, se come in, Major. Hola.
So any advice for a cafe on how to price their coffee menu accordingly is for the cafe or the cafe owner to understand what it is or how much it costs to create that cup of coffee. That doesn't necessarily just mean the core ingredient, which is the coffee or the milk. It is to understand the cost of wages, electricity, all those sorts of things, and breaking that down as a price per cup, and then understanding what you need to survive as a business, to pay your staff, to pay your suppliers. So has Project Origin increased our payments to producers to correlate with the cost of green bean prices around the world? Yes, we have. Everyone has had to pay more for coffee, otherwise we wouldn't be getting it into the country. But it's not always a model that is what we've always been purchasing off. So we've had scenarios, or there are people that we've been working with for many years, for example in Nicaragua, where we have asked them, what is your cost of production and what is it that you need to survive as a business, as a family, as a coffee producer, and how is it that we can support you for when the market will drop in the future, and how can we achieve this financial sustainability for you in the long term, because that is what Project Origin is for, is not just a short-term game. It is to connect with producers, to empower them to be a long-term sustainable relationship. So would it help for a roaster to keep the costs down by buying directly from a producer without having to pay an exporter or importer? Long story short, it probably wouldn't be, depending on the amount of coffee that is needed. There is a lot of links in the chain to get a coffee from point A to point B, and each person in that chain has a value, whether that is the coffee mill, the exporting partner, the logistics company, the shipping company, the importing company, and the logistics team behind that. If you're in a financial position where you have that kind of freedom and you can buy directly and take care of all of that, then I think that is a great business model, but it is not something that is easily achievable. And then you are also taking on more roles than just importing coffee. You are taking on the logistics, the export, liaising with the mills, the quarantine, the customs approval, the quality control process. So what can a roaster do to understand if they're paying a fair price for coffee? There is a few avenues in which that can be achieved, and that is understanding, one, the price in which you're paying generally reflects where it's coming from. So if you're paying less for a coffee, there will tend to be a little less traceability. So there won't necessarily be a producer profile or potentially a farm profile. It might just be a regional coffee that just says from a certain part of a country. And so understanding that, generally speaking, if there is a little more transparency or traceability behind it, it will cost a little bit more. But having an open and honest dialogue with the people that you are buying coffee from or importing coffee through, or trying to connect a direct model with them, or if you can travel with them when the world is in a different place, you'll be able to understand what is a fair price for you as a business and also for a fair price for the producer. So the question is, as the price of coffee has increased, should I be buying coffee now or should I be waiting? If you're buying coffee now, then obviously it is locked in at one price, and if you wait, that price may fall, but we don't know. That price may increase, we also don't know. So that is unfortunately a scenario in which you have to almost gamble on the product or the coffee in which you're buying. If the price goes down, then you are going to be locked into a coffee that theoretically costs more. If the price goes up, then you have locked in a coffee that will theoretically cost less. That is a conversation that you should be having with the people that you are buying coffee from and understanding their opinion on what may happen. But it is all a lot of speculation. None of us have the actual answer, but we can have that conversation. The earlier we know how much coffee someone is looking for, is the earlier we can have that conversation with our producing partners and try and lock in a valuable, fair price for everyone.
Did you have a nice time?
I think so.